everybody, today we're talking about Stormwatch, the Road to the Authority Compendium. Hey everybody, welcome back to BK's Bullets. As always, I'm your host, Brent and today we're talking about this Stormwatch Compendium. This is the Road to Authority Compendium. Not Volume 1, just the volume. Apparently, this is all the Stormwatch you ever want to read or reprint by DC. This contains the Road to the Authority, right? So this contains Volume 1, 37 through 50, which is about 13 issues there. Stormwatch Preview number 1, and Stormwatch Volume 2, 1 through 11. So, over 25 issues or so. I got this on a whim, just like, hey, this is interesting. I've heard about this. I have the Authority books, the newly reprinted ones. Well, newish. It was good, the older DC logo. I think they just reprinted Volume 1 again, so you might see one with the newer, older DC Bullet. God, I hate that. I like this logo. I like the old one too. Anyway, this one's been reprinted. This one with the Mark Millar stuff is harder to find, I believe. But anyway, I had these, and I read this one, and I never read the second one. And with the Superman movie coming out and the talk about the engineer, I was like, well, let me read Stormwatch. Let's see what this is all about. And after reading the Road to the Authority Compendium, I'm excited to reread this first volume. I think I'm going to do a re-review of it because there's a lot of things I'm thinking. I haven't reread it again. I'm thinking that will tie into this volume where I felt like I was a little bit clueless. Now that I have all the context and everything like that and how that world operates over the 28 issues or so that are in here, I'm ready to read The Authority and dive into that wholeheartedly. I remember liking it, and I remember liking the artwork. I don't know if I loved the story. But having read this, which is by, it's still by Warren Ellis, and he does have his own problems. You can Google him if you want to talk about that stuff. But we're going to separate the art from the artist here and mainly focus on Tom Rainey. Like, Tom Rainey is the hero of this book. Tom Rainey is a phenomenal artist, and he does a majority of the artwork in here. Most of the Volume 1 issues in here, 37 through 50. I think there's one break where he has another artist help him out on like half an issue, and Jim Lee does one full issue of just splash pages. But Tom Rainey is the unsung hero of this book. Brian Hitch is on the cover, obviously. He does a couple of issues in here. Personally, I would have loved to have seen a Tom Rainey cover, like even in the promo stuff, have that been the cover to the compendium here. But I guess, Brian Hitch, Midnighter, Apollo is what they're trying to get you to buy it for, even though Midnighter and Apollo only show up the last 5 issues in this book. Like, they only show up in this last section here when you get to Volume 2, issue number 4, which is their first appearance in comic books. So you have a whole mess of stuff right before Apollo and Midnighter even show up. So there's a lot to read and a lot of new characters to get to know. And I did enjoy it. It took me a little while to get there because I had no knowledge of Stormwatch or anything like that. Like, the Wildstorm universe is one of these things I've always been a little bit curious about, but haven't really dove into. Even when they were, in the heyday, I guess, in the 90s and 2000s or whatever. But this was fun. So basically, the first volume in here, issues 37 through 50, are a bunch of one-and-done stories. There's a problem, there's a solution, Stormwatch goes to fix it or address it, and it kind of resolves itself in that issue. And in that way, it is very approachable. There's not a whole lot of history moving in and out, and I can see why maybe it had not been really collected that much before. I know there's initial trades that they have covers of in the back here, but, there's not like a huge storyline or classic Stormwatch story to say, like, this is an evergreen Stormwatch story. Like, they're all one-and-dones until you get to issue number 48 through 50, and that's the first 3-parter that's in this book. After that, when you get to Volume 2, there's a couple more 3-parters or 4-parters, and then you have kind of the last issue, and it ends abruptly, leading into The Authority, right? But it took me a couple issues to get used to the characters and get a feel for who everybody was. We're introduced right off the bat. I do like the way that they formatted this. Like, issue number 37 is when Warren Ellis took over writing the book. And I don't know if Tom Rainey was on the book before then or not. I'm I'm going to say maybe it was his first issue, but you have the introduction of the new status quo right from issue number 37. It's basically like, hey, there's a super team. They used to operate one way. Now they're going to operate this way. This guy, Henry Bendix, the guy that looks like the dude from Empire Strikes Back in Cloud City, basically is called the Weatherman. And he's the leader of Stormwatch. And he's the eye in the sky. And he's got a bunch of people working for him. And, he assesses problems and assigns teams to go and solve those problems. So you have Stormwatch Prime, which does superhuman threats. Stormwatch Red, which is like mass damage, the heavy hitters, and then you have Stormwatch Black, which is the Black Ops team. And Stormwatch Black is kind of your introduction to the other half of the Authority. Like, you do have Apollo and Midnighter at the end of the book, but the other half that I really didn't know, you have Swift, you have Jack Hawksmoor, and Jenny Sparks are the Stormwatch Black team, and I think their first appearances are all in number 37 or 38. So you kind of get their introduction when he says, this is the new team, you guys do this, you guys do this, you guys do that. And then so you're jumping with each single issue from character to character on those teams, or from Stormwatch Prime to Stormwatch Red or Stormwatch Black. So and they don't really interact that much, and they point that out towards the end of the issue right before the big event happens, the Change or Die storyline, where they're like, hey, we don't hang out much, we should go drinking together. So there's a fun issue of them drinking around the world using the teleporters that Stormwatch has to visit different bars and different places that they're all fans of. And that I thought was a lot of fun. So by the time you get to issue number 47, which is the Jim Lee one, that's interesting. They discover like a Daemonite hollow, which makes sense because Jim Lee, Wildcats, Daemonites, that's his thing. Haven't read that. I do have the Wildcats Compendium. I don't know if I'm going to read it right away. It's very early 90s, that's for sure. But anyway, by the time you get to the Change or Die storyline, which introduces our first version of the Engineer, that's this guy in green, not to be confused with the one that we see in the Authority. She's Engineer 2, I guess. Anyway, you have this other super team coming down and basically taking down the Authority, and the Engineer's giving nanotech to the people, so he's going to give everybody their due, and you can have access to all this wonderful technology. What will you do with it? So it's kind of like, hey, we're going to upturn the world society and give all these tools in your hands, and we're going to walk away and see what you do with it. And Stormwatch is kind of like, hell no, we're not going to do that, because they believe there's some ulterior motives, and in fact there are, all right, of course. And from there, you have kind of an overturning, too, of the leadership of Stormwatch. And then we go into Stormwatch Volume 2 with the first couple issues are by Oscar Jimenez, who does a pretty good job. I'm not a super huge fan of his art. It's fine. There's a special quality about Brian Hitch that when he's on the stuff, you know it's Brian Hitch. He's got the way he tells stories and sets panels up is very big and bombastic. The way Tom Rainey does his stuff is a little more intimate, I would say, than superhero-y. And Oscar Jimenez is somewhere in the middle. But I think because I'd read so much Tom Rainey in this book, and then knowing what Hitch can deliver and does deliver towards the end of this book, I was like, So no offense, Oscar. I think you did a fine job. You were just sandwiched in between these two great artists. And, who's to say? I think he did some of the Jeff Johns Flash stuff in Volume 1. Was the other time I've read his stuff. But yeah, anyway, this is Brian Hitch at the getting to be at the top of his game. Like, you can see how he escalates from here. He does the issues here in Stormwatch towards the end of the book. Then he does Authority. Then he goes over from the Authority run to JLA with Mark Waid. He does Heaven's Ladder at some point. And from there, he goes on to do the Ultimates and blows up and then, crashes and burns with his schedule. And now he's a regular artist doing Redcoat for, I always want to call it Geiger Comics, but it's Ghost Eye? Crap. Anyway, the Jeff Johns book. And he's rocking it over there. So even the Hawkman stuff he was doing in Venom, also, like, Brian Hitch has turned his schedule around entirely from when he was on Ultimates and nobody remembers it unless you lived it, but there was like a long gap in Ultimates issues, and then Ultimates 2, I think there was like a 14-month gap between one issue and another. It took a while. But anyway, you can see here, reading these couple of issues he does here, and even towards the back of it, he only does like half an issue each time, and Michael Ryan stepping in to fill those gaps and doing a good job also. You could see like where this was going, and like, okay, I can see him building his artistic chops, his career. And it's still Brian Hitch as you know him and love him, right? It's still inked by Michael Neary, or Paul Neary, his longtime inker, I think, who passed away recently. But anyway, you could see where it's going, and you're like, oh yeah, this is the Hitch I know and love. It's not like an early version of him where he's, building himself. This is like, I found my style, this is how I draw things, and we're going to move on from here. And he stayed consistent with that style pretty much since then. So yeah, I had a surprising amount of fun reading this book. For a team I knew nothing about, for characters I knew nothing about, you're thrown in the middle of the story, just like everybody's first comic book, right? You rarely ever start with issue number 1. I would recommend this to people, even if you're not a fan of the Authority or jumping into it. It's just like, hey, do you want to read a comic about a super team of heroes that live in space and jump in to solve the Earth's problems? Yes? No? Do you care that's Marvel and DC? No? Okay, cool. Hand this book to them or go pick it up because it is fun. It retails for $60. I dare say you could find that cheaper on places online, or support your local comic shop if they've got a copy handy. I don't know that everybody did. I felt like this was under ordered, I guess you would say, or ordered low print run. So seek it out where you can find it. I think you'll like it. There's some fun stuff in here. Fuji is this guy with the red face, this big robot dude. He's fun. He's like a gaseous form. This guy, oh gosh, Jackson King. He's pretty cool. He plays a bigger role in Stormwatch Volume 2. And you have, Winter I thought was a little bit of fun. So you get to know a little bit about these characters, but never too much that you're like attached to them, and that does help out. One weird thing about this book, it does not contain the Wildcats Aliens crossover. And why would it, Brent? It's a fucking Stormwatch book. Well, you see, in Wildcats Aliens, which happens right before the last issue, Stormwatch Volume 2, Number 10 has this asteroid, this one here, go into Earth. And it ends, and you're like, wait, what happened? And there's a text page that says, in Wildcats Aliens Number 1, this happened, and this happened. Here's the text page. Just some green text. And then jumps to number 11 where a lot of, half the team dies, basically, and you're at their funeral. So, do you need to seek it out? I don't think so. But because the text page does a nice job. And ultimately, you already know that this team is over by the time you get to Stormwatch Volume 2, Number 10. Things have happened, and you're like, man, this place is falling apart. And something else has got to happen, and you're towards the end of the book, and the Authority's coming anyway, right? So that's one thing that's not collected in here. They do point out it's in the DC Dark Horse Aliens collection, and then an older collection of Stormwatch. I think it was Volume 5. They point out at the bottom of that, like, hey, if you really want to read this, it's collected these other places, and you can go and find that, secondhand or online, but they're no longer in print. And, you're not going to find that on Comixology or any of these apps either, unfortunately. So... But yeah, I had fun with this. Surprisingly, I had a lot of fun. The more and more I got into the book, the more and more fun I was having until, the last 2 days I couldn't put it down. And I was like, this is fun. I want to read this. I'm having a good time. Unlike some other things I've read recently. So, Sandman, looking at you. So yeah, those are my thoughts on the Stormwatch Road to Authority Compendium. Let me know down below if you guys like this book, if you're going to check it out based on my review. And I'll see you guys next time in the Funny Pages.